Frost Mage has always been a solid pick in World of Warcraft, and while at times they may not be the top DPS, their kit really makes them pretty useful in most situations. It's one of the 3 specs for Mage, and today we'll be covering Frost's strengths, their weaknesses, talents, rotation, and of course stats. If you're new to Frost, or just wanting to get a refresher on the spec, there's something here for everyone to learn in this video. But before we get into this video, I would just like to ask if you guys could smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. Dragonflight is right around the corner, and I'm doing my best to crank out as much valuable content for you guys as I possibly can, so that you guys can get into Dragonflight prepared for all the new systems. So with that being said, let's get into this video. Frost is a very flexible spec which provides a good amount of sustained damage for single target, cleave, and AoE. For their strengths, Frost are really good at mobility because they can spam ice lands while moving, as well as cast Frozen Orb on the run. They have great cleave damage with their Splitting Ice talent, which makes their ice lances and icicles hit an additional target. They have strong funnel damage, and to anyone who doesn't understand what funnel damage means, it basically means that the more adds that are around your target that you're attacking, you're going to do more damage to that target. Frost also has some pretty strong defensives in their kit with things like Ice Block, Ice Barrier, Alter Time, Mirror Image, and Greater Invisibility. Last but not least, they also have some great raid utilities like Time Warp and Arcane Intellect. And on top of that, the class tree provides a bunch of CC and utility for dungeons. For their negatives, the main one is Frost suffers from having pretty weak burst damage, and their big abilities like Thermal Void and Icy Propulsion punish you for not keeping up time on the spells. And on top of that, a lot of the defensive abilities that a mage have all really kind of require a lot of prior boss knowledge. For example, if you know a boss is about to do a huge AoE spike, then you need to kind of know when that's going to happen, so that way you can hit Alter Time right before that happens, and then hit it again right before you die. So then moving on to the talents. So for raiding, we want to make sure that we're going to get throughput, defensives, and mobility talents. On the mage side, we're going to start with Ice Barrier, then pick up Ice Block, Overflowing Energy, and Invisibility. Next up, we'll put 2 points into Winter's Protection, 2 points into Tempest Barrier, 2 points into Incantation of Swiftness, and then 2 points into Arcane Warding. To finish up with the first tier, we'll grab Mirror Image, Rune of Power, and Alter Time. From there, we pick up Quick-Witted, Master of Time, Ice Nova, Shimmer, Tome of Ronin, and Tome of Antronitis. And then finally, when we get onto the last tier, we start with Flow of Time, putting 2 points into that, 2 points into Temporal Velocity, 2 points into Time Manipulation, Greater Invisibility, Dragon's Breath, Temporal Warp, Displacement, and finally Meteor, which wraps up the mage part. And now we look at the Frost tree, so starting with Ice Lance, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Fingers of Frost, Flurry, Shatter, Brain Freeze, Everlasting Frost, Cold Snap, and Piercing Cold. The next tier starts with Perpetual Winter, Lonely Winter, Ice Collar, Bone Chilling, Frozen Touch, and 2 points into Wintertide, Flash Freeze, Icy Veins, and 2 points into Splintering Cold. Then finally to the last tier where we're going to grab Icy Propulsion, Splitting Ice, Snap Freeze, Slick Ice, Chain Reaction, 2 points into Hailstones, Freezing Winds, and lastly Thermal Void. Keep in mind that, depending on the fight and the raids, you'll want to make sure that you're switching out some minor adjustments. For example, on fights with a lot of adds, you'll want to make sure that you pick up Ice Collar, but on pure single target fights, you'll want to take Deep Shatter. So if I were you, I would make 2 separate builds and save them separately, one for single target raiding and then the other for AoE, so that way you can just swap back and forth really quick. And now, moving on to the dungeon build, where we're going to take Ice Barrier, Ice Block, Overflowing Energy, Invisibility, Spell Steal, 2 points into Tempest Barrier, Remove Curse, 2 points into Arcane Warding, Mirror Image, Rune of Power, and Alter Time. Next, grab Quick-Witted, Master of Time, Ring of Frost, Ice Nova, Shimmer, Blast Wave, Tome of Ronin, Tome of Antronitis, then finally get 2 points into Frigid Winds, 2 points into Flow of Time, 2 points into Temporal Velocity, take Ice Ward, Greater Invisibility, Dragon's Breath, Shifting Power, and Temporal Warp. Next up, the Frost tree. So we're going to grab Ice Lance, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Fingers of Frost, Flurry, Shatter, Brain Freeze, Everlasting Frost, Cold Snap, and Piercing Cold. Then we're going to grab Perpetual Winter, Lonely Winter, Ice Collar, Bone Chilling, 2 points into Snowstorm, Flash Freeze, Icy Veins, 2 points into Splintering Cold, and finally Freezing Rain. Then Icy Propulsion, Splitting Ice, Snap Freeze, Slick Ice, Chain Reaction, 2 points into Hailstones, Freezing Winds, and Thermal Void. Just like the raid spec, there's going to be a slight variance depending on your situation. For example, Slick Ice is for more single target damage, but if you're in a group that does a lot of huge pulls for AoE, then I would grab Freezing Rain instead. At Frost's core, the spec revolves around Shatter, Brain Freeze, and Fingers of Frost. Shatter causes spells against frozen targets to receive a significant critical strike damage increase as well as 50% increased critical strike chance. Brain Freeze is gained by casting Frostbolt, and when you get a Brain Freeze proc, it'll make your next Flurry instant cast, and make it also deal 50% increased damage. Flurry is also going to put a debuff on the target called Winter's Chill. Winter's Chill causes the target to take damage as if it were frozen, and then you also have Fingers of Frost, which makes your Ice Lance treat the target as if they were frozen as well. So you see, the concept of Frost is all about trying to maximize your shatter damage on the target by managing all of these different procs. And I know this all sounds pretty confusing, but don't worry, I'm going to try my best to explain this in a really simple way. The general idea behind the Frost rotation is that you should be spamming Frostbolt until you get a Brain Freeze. Then at that point you'll want to cast Flurry so then you can do 2 Ice Lances afterwards. Then anytime you get Fingers of Frost, you'll want to be using Ice Lance on them. There is this one trick about Frostbolting and Flurry that I'll get into in a little bit later, but the idea is you'll always want to use Frostbolt right before you use an instant cast Flurry proc. So let's look at the actual priority for the Frost rotation. This is a list of what you guys should be using from the top down, having the highest priority and then the bottom being the lowest. Cast Icy Veins. Cast Meteor if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. Cast Comet Storm if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. Cast Rune of Power if you haven't already used it with Icy Veins. Cast Frozen Orb. Cast Flurry if your previous spell was Frostbolt or Ebon Bolt. Cast Ice Lance with Fingers of Frost or if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. Cast Frostbolt. For your AoE rotation, it's going to be a little different, but not too much. So, cast Frozen Orb. Cast Icy Veins. Cast Blizzard if you have 2 targets or more. Cast Comet Storm if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. Cast Rune of Power if you haven't already used it with Icy Veins. Cast Flurry. Cast Ice Lance with Fingers of Frost or if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. Cast Shifting Power if it's not already affected by Rune of Power. Cast Frostbolt. One last thing to note about the Frost rotation is the Flurry and Shatter Combo. Flurry queuing is a way to abuse travel times for our spells to gain more benefits from Shatter. Mastering this is vital to doing good DPS with Frost. As I briefly went over earlier in this, the idea is that when you see you have an instant cast Flurry proc, you hard cast Frostbolt, and then as soon as that Frostbolt is finished casting, you hit Flurry. This is because of travel times, as Flurry actually travels faster than Frostbolt, so by the time Flurry hits the target, everything lines up and that Frostbolt is actually going to be gaining the benefit of being frozen. So the combo is going to look like this. You're going to wait for an instant Flurry proc, then you're going to hardcast Frostbolt, then Flurry, then you're going to Ice Lance twice, and that's what we call the Shatter Combo. And then just a couple of things to note about Frost is we have a lot of procs, so how should you be prioritizing the procs? Because Fingers of Frost and Winters of Chill both have minimal benefit of stacking, so you don't really want to overlap them. So if you have both a Flurry charge and Fingers of Frost, the first situation is, if you're casting Frostbolt, cast Flurry at the end and simply waste the Fingers of Frost proc. This is because Flurry provides significantly more damage than Fingers of Frost, and you don't want to risk gaining Brain Freeze and wasting another Flurry charge. Otherwise, spend your Fingers of Frost procs before casting Frostbolt and then Flurry. So moving on to the stats, we're not going to be going super in-depth with this because with stats, the best way to figure out what gear is best for you is to sim yourself. In the future, I'll be putting out a guide on how to actually sim your character, but if you guys can't wait until then, I'm sure there's plenty of other guides out there that you guys can look up to actually figure out how to do the simming. However, generally because of how much intellect is going to be on gear now, you typically just want to go after the gear that has the higher item level than what you're currently wearing. And that about wraps up this guide. I hope you guys got something out of this video, and if you guys could, please smash that like button and subscribe to my channel, so that way you guys are never missing out on my videos. Thanks so much for checking out my content, and I will see you guys in the next video.